Hey everyone, here we are with our latest episode of the Sidebar podcast. And we got some fun topics to talk about today. Things like how to handle conflict, keys to reconciliation in a relationship. And then for those of you who are single, we had a couple of fun questions come in. I don't know, I think they're fun. Maybe you will too. Why did Paul say it would be better for you to remain single like me? And also, what are must-have crucial conversations for dating couples who are considering marriage? And so we're thrilled that you've joined us. And I love that two of my friends, Woody Morwood and Dani Valentine, have joined us today. How are you two doing today?
Pretty good.
Doing good.
I think I got to fill in for Mr. Music, I think he was called last time. So, hi, I'm in a replacement for Brian Roselle.
No, not a replacement. You're the man. So, Woody, your first time joining us.
Yep.
This is the Sidebar podcast, and we're talking about fantasy marriage type stuff. So, for those who don't know you, who are you? Tell us about your family, all that fun stuff.
Sounds good. Well, I'm one of the campus pastors here, and I have a wife that has been able to stay with me for 29 years.
Wow.
The truth is,
amazing.
actually, we have had great 29 years of marriage, and we even dated 5 years before we got married. So how crazy is this? I really feel like we grew up together. We have been together for 34 years. We have a 24-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. And Aaron, I got to tell you, as you were preaching today and you highlighted prayer, Julie and I were sitting together in church and nodding our heads because even the simplest of prayers have done so much to help us as how we've been able to be together all these years. God's made the difference.
That's so good. Okay, Woody, got to ask you this.
Yep.
We had this question in a little bumper video before the sermon. Who is your favorite celebrity couple?
So my wife is going to laugh at this one because I do not know my celebs, all right? I don't pay attention to them, couldn't name them. Half the ones that were mentioned today I didn't know except for Sonny and Cher, which is horrible, shows my age, right? But the first one I thought it was actually animation, and it was the Croods. So the prehistoric, life, they're kind of journeying across all the dinosaurs, and Mr. Crude is always in trouble because all he cares about is survival. And all he wants to do is make sure everybody's safe. And the wife basically says, lighten up. And so maybe that's like my own marriage.
That is awesome. That is pretty good. Dani, how are you? And what have you been up to since last week?
Oh gosh, what have I been up to since last week? Mostly just, apparently somebody in the room, I'm going to call him out. Jared, our videographer, wants me to talk about dating apps. And so might as well bring that up.
So hot off the press. This is new news.
Let's just be transparent here. I'm currently working through myself and going to therapy and finding my own worth before I ever bring anyone else into that. So doing that first for right now.
Stuff.
So it's a nay for dating apps for you right now.
Yeah, we're going to hold off on that.
Gotcha. Okay. That sounds wise.
Yes.
Very cool.
All right. So to get this started, today you talked about reconciliation this morning. Could you just give us a quick little recap for those that haven't tuned in yet or just need a refresher?
Sure. So long story, did a lot of talking, made short. Took this passage from 2 Corinthians 5 where the Apostle Paul talks about reconciliation and what God has done for us through Jesus in reconciling us back to himself. That Jesus took our place, that Jesus makes a way for us to be reconciled to God. And as we experience that, it can then be applied to marriage, to friendships. When we have conflict, when we have distance, that we can be reconciled. And it's living out that blueprint. Again, you keep using that word, that master plan that God has for us in our relationships, to be united, to be reconciled, and to step into that flow of what God is doing in Jesus in every relationship. So then real specifically, we ended with 4 things like application. What can we do? And we talked about prayer as a first response, not as a last resort. And a lot of us, if we're not careful, prayer is a last resort. And we're like, I've tried everything. But prayer is supposed to be just a natural, like a heartbeat, a part of our life. And I wasn't just talking about like when we're fighting, go to your corners and pray, but like whisper prayers, always being prayerful and mindful. What do I need to say? How do I respond? Secondly, deal with conflict promptly. Deal promptly with conflict is this idea of just not letting stuff settle, not allowing bitterness or holding a grudge to remain in our lives. Learn to listen and ask heart-level questions. is really from that James passage that says everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, and that we got to lean into that. And then lastly, repent and live like it. Marriage has given me ample opportunity to repent because I have a mirror right there very often of how I don't always have the right tone or respond in the right way. And my wife's a great feedback loop for me. She'll tell me. She likes to deal with conflict quickly, and so it's a gift, but it's sometimes also pretty difficult to have that in your life, and my kids in my life, to have ample opportunity to say, I'm so sorry. I wish I wouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have had that attitude. But that's what reconciliation is about. There is no reconciliation without repentance. And we have to learn how to live in repentance so we can experience the joys of reconciliation. That's the only what God can do part. God can only bring that kind of reconciliation to good marriages that aren't great, or to broken relationships that need to be restored. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
Aaron, as you were preaching, it was crazy. I thought of a metaphor that I heard before, and I wish I could tell you who said it. But they describe marriage as a gem trembler. So gems that would rub up against each other, that the difficult moments as well as the great moments would really help the beauty of what God could do in those. And as you were talking about conflict and prayer and reconciliation, I just had that gem trembler image in my mind. That's good stuff this morning.
That's good. Thank you so much.
Yes, it was a great message this morning. Are we ready for some questions now?
Sure.
We got a few questions from our listeners and our church family. The first one, kind of an interesting one. I've always had this in the back of my head. It's, after God, do we put our spouse first or our kids? Very interesting.
I love that question too. And I think that question probably sort of is something I even resonate with, but it probably also betrays like a line of thinking that I have. Part of me loves ranking stuff. Like I grew up David Letterman, the top 10. I love SportsCenter top 10. Like I can be in a podcast or working out or whatever, but if SportsCenter top 10, I stop whatever I'm doing to watch the top 10. It just captures my attention. And I think there's a part of us that we always love to prioritize. This is here, then this, then this. But a part of me wonders if that's even the best approach, the best way to look at it. What if instead of God first, spouse second, kids third, or is there a different order? What if the approach was Jesus at the center of it all? Jesus at the center of the marriage, Jesus at the center of my parenting, Jesus at the center of my job. Because, I mean, if we're at work, we're on the clock. How do I say it's Jesus first? Well, I need to pray, read my Bible, and my boss would say, no, you need to do your job. And so that's not Jesus first, but it can be Jesus at the center, how I do my work. Paul talks about working heartily as unto the Lord, not unto people to please them. But the reality is we have different seasons, and different seasons have different priorities. So there's a unique allotment of time and energy. And I was talking to one of our worship leaders today, and she was talking about having young kids. And I said, I can't wait to go home and take a nap. And she said, I can't wait till the day I can go home and take a nap. And it's just, I'm in a different season. And so I don't have the demands of little children when I go home thinking children first, what's the order? But it's Jesus at the center of whatever it is we're doing, gives us this perspective of how God is involved in every aspect of our life. And we're not fighting or competing always for priority. We're wanting full saturation. God, His presence in every area of our life. And that's one of the ways that I have handled that. But that's a great question. And again, I keep saying this. Some of these things are easier said than done. Like in theory, it makes perfect sense, but practicality, it requires a real discipline, a working through what even someone of old, Brother Lawrence, practicing the presence of God in every circumstance. Easier said than done, but vitally important. Woody, since you're here, we've got some questions we also want you to be able to address. Here's another question. And I just thought this was fascinating. After 13 years divorced, can a marriage be restored? And how can we know the Lord's will? That's a great question.
Yeah. And what's so great about that question is you can sense the depth of desire of maybe having something reconciled like you were talking about in the sermon. all of us want to see relationships made right. Aaron and Dani, man, I wish the person that wrote that question, I wish we had a private moment here where we could sit with a brother or sister in Christ. We don't know if it was a husband or a wife that wrote that. Because there's so much that goes into all that. Some of the questions that I begin to ask are, what originally broke that marriage? It takes two to tango, I like to say. Sometimes it takes two in a marriage. And so in that, as somebody's wondering, is there the possibility God could bring this back together? I really think God would need to do a special work in two different people's lives and really create that. I think I would suggest this. Maybe every day, going past year 13 into year 14, continue the prayer, Lord, your will be done. I found that we serve a God that doesn't like to send us on a wild goose chase or a treasure hunt where we never get to find the treasure. I think if we're really direct and say, God, if this is something you would choose to restore, would you continue to give me enough to hold on to that? Would you give me little doors to walk through? Would you prompt a new conversation or help me to see that they're interested in the same way? And if I were to just kind of give one blanket answer, Dani and Aaron, it would be this. The Lord can do anything. Anything is possible. But at the same time, the Lord also works with each of us in our circumstances, all the things that have happened between two different people. And I would say, stay prayerful. Lord, don't trick me. Don't send me on a wild goose chase. Don't have me look for a treasure that's not going to happen. Would you continue? And the other piece that I would say is surround yourself with friends. A lot of times when I'm not thinking straight, you know what? Wise counsel, a group of friends that are praying with me can really speak up and tell me, hey, you're holding on to something you probably should be letting go of. And here's what's amazing. I've heard a lot of people find out God is up to something once we finally let it go, not when we cling to it, hold on to it, and try to control it ourselves.
Yeah.
So I say that in a tender way because I know this is a heartfelt question and there's a lot more story that goes along with it.
That's good.
And honestly, looking at it from not nearly as high of a level as marriage, and I think about friends that I've had that were dating and then they broke up and then got back. And my question is always, well, what's changed? Have you changed? Have they changed? Because if you're just going back to the same exact situation, you don't know, like it might just turn out the same exact result. But I love that you prefaced Woody at first. Is this God's will? And God will have the loudest voice in your life if you allow him. And honestly, if you're struggling with that, prayer. Power of prayer. We've talked about it, I think, every single week now on this podcast. All right. This question is for Aaron. Along the same lines of marriage and the unique conflicts that we have, this question is, when do you know you need marriage counseling?
Yeah. And with all the love in my heart, I would say the question before, you need marriage counseling because it's a unique situation. And that's one of the things I think through, like unique circumstances, there's going to be a really short list. Like, I don't even know who they are that you could go to say, who else has been divorced for 13 years that we could look to as a guide to then get through marriage. And I would say a marriage counselor is there for that exact kind of thing, not because they've necessarily experienced that, but they've processed other similar experiences that they could help us. I went through a season where I probably just said, everybody needs counseling. Every marriage needs counseling. And then 2 summers ago, I read this book, True Spiritual Community from Larry Crabb. And I was really convicted by what he said. He said the reason that we need so many counselors is because we have so few spiritual friends. And it picks up what you just said, Woody, about that prior answer is, I believe that there's a lot of things that if we were actually in authentic spiritual community with others, maybe as God designs it, there would be less of a need for some kinds of counseling. But then I also I'm very aware that there are unique circumstances. And there's, I think as we were a number of years ago looking for marriage counseling, it wasn't because we were in crisis. In our marriage, it's because we had been in crisis in our lives and we wanted a good foundation for the future of our marriage. And I didn't know many other people that I could look to that could have said that their child had fought brain cancer 3 different times and been in a 7-year fight for their life. That was years ago. That would be able to say, okay, that's just normal kinds of relational conflict. That's abnormal Being a lead pastor is abnormal. And so like I felt like we needed that. And sometimes there's everybody's circumstance is unique, but I mean unique in that there aren't other examples to look to. But there's even that question, needing marriage counseling, there's different kinds of counseling. There's different kinds of approaches. There's different kinds of length. And sometimes all of us could use an outside perspective just for a short season. And others of us, we have a lot of brokenness and truthfully baggage in the past. And it's going to take some deep work to get through that. That's the kind of question that has so many levels of nuance that I would echo what you just said, Woody, a minute ago. I think with good friends and prayer counsel, we could make that decision not by ourselves, but with others. And maybe others would say, no, we think with the right friends you could journey through this. Or others would say, no, as we've prayed, we think you need specific conversation with people. And so I think that's just a way that we use this community around us to determine what's best. And here's what I've noticed, this is a what would this be? A pandemic soapbox. The amount of decisions we like to make all by ourselves and say, God told us, but there's no accountability. There's no deep relationship. And it's sort of become a free-for-all. It's almost like judges doing whatever's right in our own eyes. And I think there is the power of the church and the power of spiritual community to help us negotiate life and make decisions so we don't feel like we're in it on our own. But that requires a level of humility that is hard to come by in this season. But I prayerfully believe God's still stirring that in our midst.
Well, one of the best things about getting counseling or wise counsel like that is hopefully there is a way of picking up tools that then can be used in every other thing that comes up in the marriage. So it's almost like a maturing process for the relationship. And if communication, listening, as well as articulating how somebody's doing, even in Aaron, your situation, a crisis moment, my guess is those communication skills now play into so many other ways. So absolutely. A good counselor is going to help set you up for the future to be able to do that in many ways.
Which leads us to our next question is, before we get into even married and needing counseling, what can we do before? And this question says, how do you know you're ready to get engaged or married? And is it okay to have doubts in that moment?
Oh, yeah. Woody, you may want to take a shot at this. I'll start. Here's the thing that scares me the most. Is not the ones who have no doubt about getting engaged or getting married. The people who scare me the most are the ones who have no doubts. And I'm like, do you know what you're getting into? This is a big deal. And so I don't know of anything major in life that we have 100% certainty about. I think we go into getting engaged. I think we go into getting married. I think we go into having children. I think we go into picking a career path. And the best that we could hope for is maybe to be 80% confident. I mean, let's be realistic. So that means there's still 20% questions, doubts, what ifs are involved. But at some point, there's a confident making a decision that after we make that decision, we move into 100% confidence, and we live in that. Woody, how would you even address that?
Well, I think if you're going to get married, hopefully you've moved beyond the I am infatuated, 100% in love with you, and I think you're the most perfect person that ever walked the planet, because that won't be a good starting place, because neither one of you will ever be perfect. And so how do you know when you're ready? I think when there's an understanding of both the beauty and the gifts and the originality of who God has created, but also some of the hurts and some of the things that are in the process of transformation. And when you love the entire person, knowing what it means to do life together, you're not just loving that fabled idea or that fantasy that we've been talking about, but you're ready for God to do a work in each other and doing a work in you together. And so I actually think it's good when you're at a spot when you know neither are perfect and you're both flawed and you need God all the more, and you can invite God into that. So I think beyond the infatuation, beyond the what you see, but what you know and what it's like to be known by one another, you actually can enter in a marriage even with a lot of things for both of you to work on.
That's good. That's what, as you were saying that, I had flashbacks to when Holly and I got engaged. And I think we had a little bit of that, but we probably didn't have anywhere near the fullness of this understanding of both the strengths and the struggles and that kind of thing. But when I asked her to marry me, you know what she did? Dani, you won't believe this. She died laughing.
Oh. I was going to say, did she say why?
I was down on one
Wow.
knee and she died laughing. I didn't know her enough to know that's her nervous response. And I was like, I think I need to ask the question again. And so, yeah, that's very good counsel, Woody. I wish I would have heard that earlier in life. She did say yes, by the way.
Oh,
She did say yes, by the way. That was 21 years ago, so we're doing okay. I got a question, Woody, that I think is a good one. It gets really practical into Scripture, and this is for the singles listening to us. Why did Paul say, the Apostle Paul, this is 1 Corinthians 7, that it would be better for you to remain single like me? Paul's like, I wish all of you could remain single. Dani, I don't even know what you think about this, but is that good news or bad news? I don't know. But Woody, why do you think Paul said that?
Oh man, it just strikes at some of our deepest dreams, desires,
Sure.
thoughts, and realities. And whether we're married or single, I think we scratch our heads a little bit because the monastic lifestyle. Not many of us wake up in the morning imagining
about
being a
it.
priest. A
There's
nun,
no
or,
Disney movie about
right,
that, right?
Exactly. I mean, The Sound of Music. She broke out of it and got married and happily ever after with tons of kids. Right. So I think it really strikes at what has our attention, what takes our time. And the truth is, I think the Apostle Paul probably could have mentioned a wide range of things like a hobby or something, a conviction, or something that you pour all of yourself into. I think anything can take the place of God in our lives. But when you do marry, in order to have a great relationship, in order to watch out for the other, there are going to be sacrifices that are made. When you add kids and diapers, we were already talking about that, the extra busyness of life. I think the Apostle Paul was just highlighting that in many ways, if you choose marriage, you choose your family as a primary source of your ministry. Which isn't a bad thing, but it does. And really in that space where we're living that out in a nonstop fashion, you want to talk having to be on our A game and God really transforming us in front of our wife or our husband or our kids. There is ministry right there. But sometimes the single is able to be out more nights of the week or be busier with others or do meals with others instead of going home and doing 12 loads of laundry. I think there is ministry in both, and both are needed. But there are times, things, and convictions that will take all of us. And so I think the Apostle Paul wanted to make sure that, in some ways, what he was saying was, do not think marriage alone or kids alone will fulfill you, because God and the work that God is up to is actually the first and foremost thing. And so here's another way to look at that.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I love being married. I love being married. But if we're not honest in saying that marriage has distraction elements to it, it's that myth of multitasking. I think years ago I felt like everybody's like, let's multitask better. And now sort of research is coming out, if you multitask, you do everything you do at a little bit less than if you actually focused. And that for me feels like it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I want to be married. I love being married. I love being a dad, and especially now that they're getting older, I really, really love that. But it's going to occupy some of my time and some of my space and some of my energy, and it's just being honest about that. And it's not that one's better. It's not that one's right, one's wrong. Being single or married, it's just there's a fulfillment and there's a contentment that is available in either one. But we got to be honest. It's real. The distraction element is real. And, there's benefits though to either one. And I think what Paul says again and again and again is, can we just learn contentment in whatever circumstance we find ourselves in? Not long for the grass is the greener on the other side kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
Could you just dare to take a risk and let me be morbid for 1 second?
Ooh.
This is one of the things that I think about as well when I talk to both older, mature couples as well as young couples. If somebody gets married, the chances that those two will die together is very rare.
Yep.
And part of what I've found older, mature believers that have had an influence on my life is that preparing to be single is sometimes a second part of life as well. And so if my only contentness is in my spouse, I may someday miss another 5, 10, 25 years of what it looks like to be faithful to God and those around me. And so, not trying to be morbid, but it's interesting how we can put so much into just, but we watch singles who are widowed, who are faithful to God and had to relearn what it means to once again journey through life alone.
Yeah. I think some of my best advice to singles that read a verse like that and get filled with anger first, because they just want to be in that relationship or to be with somebody, is to figure out who you are apart from somebody. Because when you get into a relationship, I've talked with Ron about this multiple times, is have your own thing. Have something that you call your own. So, and if you find that while you're single, it's so much easier to hold on to it when you go into a relationship. For me, it's going to the gym. I put that as that is my thing to do. I'm going to hold on to that and take it in a relationship. If my future spouse or whatever wants to join, then he joins. But if not, I'm going to hold on to that so that I have my own thing. And if we were to look at that as a relationship with God, have your own relationship with God first. And that's in general for equally yoked and whatnot. But put that priority first so that when you go into a relationship, it's more beneficial.
Absolutely. And it's the boundary of independence and interdependence that you just described. And it's having appropriate, healthy boundaries with yourself and with other people. Totally agree. Totally agree. Okay, here's the last question, right? I think this is the last question for the day. And I actually have I have a couple very, very, very key things you're going to want to write down and take notes for this question, but I'll also give Woody a shot. What are the must-have conversations for dating couples considering marriage? Now, here were mine. I think I had 3 things. The must-have conversations. What kind of ice cream will we get? Because you can't have cheap ice cream. What kind of orange juice will we buy? Because you have to have quality orange juice, no skimping on the orange juice. And what kind of toilet paper will we buy? And those were conversations that were very important for us to have before we got engaged or married. Probably Woody.
Man, you went deep on those, Aaron.
Your answer's probably going to be a little bit more thoughtful and spiritual than that. But what do you think?
Well, I'm actually in the process of doing premarital counseling for a young couple right now. And those might be the lighthearted, fun ones. But here's some other ones that are really great that I'm always surprised when you get into the premarital counseling that couples haven't talked about yet. One of the things that I love to tell couples to do if they're able to do this is talk about styles of communication. Especially fighting. Fighting is never something you enjoy. And some people need a lot of time to think through how they want to respond. And they have to learn to say phrases like, give me an hour and I'll come back to you. And others are like, I'm ready to talk now. Let's solve this now. I'm always surprised how few couples have started to realize that they have different styles and how can they find a great compromise as well as agreement on how they do that. One of the other ones I love to throw out to people is talk about your future dreams. This does not work out. If one of them wants 5 kids and one wants only 1 kid and they've never even talked about that, it's a little bit harder to work through after you've been married for 5 years. Where do you want to live or not live? Do you ever have a crazy dream of owning a business or selling everything and moving to the Bahamas? Or sometimes couples don't always talk about all their dreams, and then they realize that when those dreams come together, they can be really beautiful if they're not surprises.
But the Bahamas.
The Bahamas would be
nice.
Sweet, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then the other one I would say is your story and history. One of the things I think is really unfair after you get married is to bring up stories of the past or ask questions. I always love to say, have you both been able to ask everything about each other's past that you would like to know about? Are you guys ready to move forward from this point on? Can you talk about these things again as we already started that conversation? This isn't a new thing or an unanswered thing. That the depth of relationship going into a marriage should be, we know and understand each other as much as we want to from the past, and we're ready to move forward into the new spaces that God has for us. So there's a couple that are almost as heavy as toilet paper, ice cream, and I don't remember what the other one was.
No, I think those are great. And the one I would add that I just in past years have really just felt the weight of is family of origin issues. And talking about those, here's the reality. We don't just marry a person. We marry their family, their friend network, like it's a package deal, and you don't disconnect from those things. And the family of origin stories will have more influence than any of us know, and we're just not aware of it because it's the water we've been swimming in, if you use that fish analogy. And so digging into that ahead of time, I think could really save yourself some heartache. One of the things I think is interesting is it's always easier to work on stuff before you have the ring on your finger. It's easier to work on things when you don't have the pressure of we live together, we share bills, we blah, 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 blah. But to work on those things in an environment that's a little bit less threatening gives a level of health that prepares for the future. And I would just say, either the right pre-marriage counselor or the right marriage mentors who are helping you maybe look at resources, read the books, or have the right conversations could go a long, long ways to having those conversations. And it's not just one-on-one having the conversation. It's with some wise mentors or counselor who or pastor who have navigated some time. They've got some experience. They have some wisdom to offer. And having those conversations the earlier, not too early. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
first date.
I'm not saying that's on your profile on that app. But I'm saying if you see things progress, the sooner you have some of these conversations, the better. That's all I have to say about that.
Yes. Well, we thank you so much for both of you guys, your incredible wisdom today on all things conflict, dating, engagement, what have it. And we just also thank you guys for watching and listening wherever you're at. We hope you've enjoyed Sidebar, and we are not done. We're just going to move from a weekly episode to a monthly episode.
Whew, yes.
So as we move into this new series about the 7 churches in Revelation, we hope you continue to join us online at hillsidechurches.com. You can follow us at Hillside Churches on all social media platforms, as well as if you're out there and you're needing care right now, if you're just struggling, please head to our website. There are people here that would love to connect with you, as well as we have some resources on all things care. We hope that you've had a great time listening. I pray for you guys throughout this week. I think all 3 of us here do, and we just hope that you will see God's love throughout this week.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.